So this is the tote front that we cut in the Cut Me Tote video. Now I'll link that at the top if you haven't seen it. Basically it shows you how to cut a tote for a bag panel, either adjusting a existing pattern or cutting that from scratch. So all I've done with that is put interfacing on the back and cut some foam, which I've put out of the seam allowance. I've cut another one the same, and I have cut a hole where my zipper overlay is going to go, and I've got foam which is not yet attached. I'll attach that after I've done my zipper overlay. I've also cut 2 lining to be exactly the same. So after I've cut them, what I've done here is I've started at 1/4 of an inch smaller than at the top and just tapered out to be the same as it was at the top. So I have just interfaced those. I have my zipper overlay pockets. So if you're wanting a zipper overlay, determine how long you want your overlay and then cut your pockets either the same width or a little bit wider. I'm going to put a slip pocket on the inside, got my zip. I'm also going to put some faux piping around the top. So I've got this strip of vinyl. I'm going to fold that in half and put that between the exterior and the lining around the top of the bag. And I think that'll look pretty cool just to separate the lining and the exterior. And then we have our straps. So I've cut these at 26 inches by 2 because I'm going to do a double strap. So I have drawn a line down the middle of those and put double-sided tape down the middle. Now the black is very, very thin, so I've put a tiny piece, about a 3/4 inch strip of interfacing on that as well. So that's everything we need. Now you can do any arrangement of pockets or no pockets or whatever you want. This is just basically how to sew up the tote, and I'm doing a few extras with it as well. So I shall start with doing a bit of a feature on the front. I'm going to sew in the ditch right around the panel. And that just gives it a quilted look, and it looks quite cool. So just in the ditch. As you can see, that's just tightened up that panel and makes it stand out a bit from the back, so it makes it look like it's on the same plane. Tie these off at the back. I'm just going to add a little bit of double-sided tape over those just to keep those from pulling back. So I don't know if you can see that, but it actually does make it stand out a little bit because it comes up. It's not down and behind. So now I'm going to work on my zipper overlay. So now I'm going to put that aside and get my zipper overlay. So I start by putting a bit of double-sided tape around the edge. So because we've already got our overlay cut, it makes it quite easy. Because what you can do is just turn that over. So I'm going to put that centered in there. It doesn't look like it's quite centered, but let's check it. That's about right. Then we can just take the rest of our tape off. So that's all in there. Now I'm also going to put one of my little fabric woven labels in under here because I didn't want to put my actual bag tag on the front. Now you can either put it at the end, but I suggest putting it at the right side if you're putting a tag on, so then your zipper pull doesn't hang over it, or you can actually have it sideways in there. So I'm just going to sew around the very edge of that in just a couple of mils. Now I'm using black on black, so I'm just going to double back rather than pulling my tails through. So now we want to get our pocket pieces, our zip, and I've probably lost my pole, but anyway. So let's just put that aside for now. So we've got our 2 pocket pieces. Now I've interfaced mine because I'm working on an industrial and it doesn't particularly like just a single layer of fabric. Now I've got my zip. I'm going with this rainbow stripe, which looks quite cool with all the colours, and that's on my website at the moment. Now I'm going to put that on the right side along the top, and I'm going to sew down there at about a 6 mil, just under a 6 mil seam allowance. Now I'm going to open that up like that and put it on top of the other piece so that the long edges line up and so that our pocket is right sides together, lining up the edges, or the sides I should say. And I'm going to sew down there at the same. What I find easier at this point is to open that out, flatten down our seams and just sew down the very edge of them. I find you just get a neater edge on your zip. So now, if we get a little bit of double-sided tape, now you don't have to use double-sided tape at all. You can just sew this in place. I'm just going to put a piece over the middle of there, just on the covering the seams. But if you notice, I've kept it out of the edges, and I do that so that it's not in our way later on. And let's get our zipper pull, and I shall melt my edges. I love this little rainbow dragonfly. Isn't he cute? Look, you think that's cute? Right, so we're going to put that on. Now, I always make sure I check which one is sitting over the top so I know that's the one I need to put on first or have higher. When we put this on our bag, we want to make sure our zip is opening and closing the right way. So I put it on from the right, and then it's going to close to the right. Make sure your tape is well stuck down because it doesn't want to come off. Then we're going to get our zipper overlay and just center. You can kind of feel where that is and center it in the middle that way and that way. Flip that up and take your other piece of tape off. Push it down on your zipper tape. So what we're going to do now is just sew around the inside of that box at whatever seam allowance you like to do. And I'm going to use my owl just to hold it in place. Again, I'm going to backstitch and sew all around the inside. So that is all done. So we flip that over, pull our lining down off the tape at the top. Now one is going to be longer than the other at this stage, so trim that to be the same length. Turn it back over, and we want to get into the sides like this. This is why we didn't put tape right into the edge. Sew down there, along there, and back up the other side. Now if you want to turn through your pocket, you can leave the bottom open, but I've put quite a small pocket on, so I'm going to turn through the bottom of the bag. So I'm going to trim up my zipper at this end. Now I always leave a little bit out the side, and I shouldn't be using my good scissors. And melt the edges of your zipper. Give that a good melt. So that's our back all prepared. Now the only thing we need to do now is put our foam on. Now you can attach your foam however you do. You can, if you're using adhesive foam. I'm not. So what I'm going to do, and I like to have my pocket out of it. So I'm going to feel where the bottom of my pocket comes to, and it comes to there. So I'm going to put a mark there like that. And put a mark at the other side, so about there. Now I'm going to draw a line across there and cut just underneath it. Like that. Now this is headliner foam, and I get it from a place here in New Zealand that provides actually it's panel foam, it's for car panels. They do have headliner foam as well, but looks like it's the same thing but a slightly different thickness. This is the 3mm. And then I've just brought my pocket out through that. So what I'm going to do is I use a spray contact glue, and I'm going to lift that up like that, spray there and there. It's actually a little bit low, isn't it? But that's okay. And then I'm going to lift that up, spray there, and attach my foam. So I shall go outside and do that because I don't want spray contact glue in my sewing room. And I shall be back in a second. So that's it all sprayed onto the back. Now the good thing about the one I use is it's repositionable for a few minutes. So it's easy to fix if you do any problems or any mistakes. So now we're just going to simply take our front, lie it right sides together, and line up the bottom and sew along there with whatever seam allowance you usually use. I'm going to use a 3/8 of an inch because that's what I've allowed for on my panel. My chair is squeaky and I need to fix it. Okay, so I like to have a butterflied seam at the bottom. So I'm going to butterfly that out and sew along that side. I'm going to avoid bending that too much while the glue is still drying. So I'll bend this side. You can just feel. Now you can do it from the other side if you wish. I like to top stitch this from this side. And I'm going to do that with a 6mm just so that it really grabs that foam. And then we have our butterflied seam. Now we just want to simply fold those together, line up an edge. Now you can clip it in place if you are worried about it moving, and just sew down there at the same seam allowance as you're using. I'm using 3/8 as I said. Now if you're using a fabric you can press, I suggest you definitely press it. I like my seams to be open, and so I tend to glue them. And it does make a nice difference to the edge of the bag once it's all finished. Oh, my glue's actually started now. Now you definitely don't have to do this. This is personal preference, and it's something I like to do because I like my seams open. So now while I've got it like that, I'm going to box this corner. So bring both of our seams together, butterflied, and also butterfly the corners there. Now you can feel, that's a little bit off, you can feel when it's not right if you get your fingernails in there. I'm going to sew across there my seam allowance, then come over about 1/8 of an inch and sew another row. Just like that. And it's a good idea to have your 2 rows because it gives the bottom a good reinforcing. So we shall come over to this side, line up our edges, and again sew down there. So we're going to repeat what we've just done on this side, and then we shall continue. So there you go. We have both our corners boxed and another row of reinforcing stitching along the edge. So I'm going to put that to one side for now and work on our lining. Let's have a look. What have we got? We've got both our linings. I'm going to clip the centres. It is a good habit to get into to do this when you're cutting. I'm a bit slack with it. A slip pocket. So I'm going to sew down there, along and back to the top. Trim my corners off. And simply turn our pocket through. Just get your finger right in the very edge and push that through. I like to get my scissors in there and just put some pressure on that seam, and that pushes that out. Get your very edges, give that a bit of a tug, and baste across the top. Got any little stragglies, trim those off. Right, double-sided tape. Now you do need a wider one for this. Down the middle. Then we just want to place that so that it's just under halfway. And fold that over to meet that edge like that. So now we're just going to sew down there, not sewing over here at all, just start sewing right there and across there. If one side is thinner than the other, sew on the thinner side, because then you'll make sure that you catch the back. Now run your scissors right along the edge of your pocket, and that way you're not going to be cutting your pocket. So just have them sitting right on the edge, like that. Now we shall put that on a lining. I find it just as easy to fold that in half and line up my centres. And I can see that, and I'm just going to sew around the edge, but it can move, so I'm just going to put a pin on that side just to keep it from moving. Now don't forget to back stitch well at the top, start and finish. So you can back stitch there and then bring this over if you wish. So make sure that's joining up and just put it in next to your other seam. So now when you get those, your seams are going to be lined up like that. So again, I've butterflied open those seams. So I'm just going to sew across there. You can put pins in, etc., but if you crease it and it's got interfacing on it, it pretty much stays. Do the same with the other side. Trim those up a little bit if you want. I just make sure I don't cut off my back stitching at the bottom just in case. So that's our lining. And then I'm going to work on my straps. So as I said, I have got a line down the middle and double-sided tape. Now you don't need to use double-sided tape at all. It really, I just do find on straps it's very helpful. And you can eyeball it rather than drawing a line down the middle as well. Oops. Now this vinyl isn't got any interfacing and it is a little bit flexible, so I'm going to start in a couple of different places because then it's not going to push out and twist. Make sure your ends are at the end. Turn it around and do the same on the other side. Now I am bringing this in to meet. If I was doing a folded strap, I wouldn't meet it. I'd have a couple of mil in between. So you see that meets all the way along. So that's my first one, and I'll continue to do all the others exactly the same. So we have 2 black and 2 purple. I'm going to put a thin strip of double-sided tape down there because I don't want to put another big bit. And again, you don't need to put any more double-sided tape on your strap. So I'm going to do a double row of stitching, one at 6mm and one at 3. So one at 1/4 inch and one at 1/8. So when you do this, make sure it lines up perfectly on top. Now you can feel where that's going. I actually find it's easier to do it, or better to do it with feel than is by eye. Right, so I'm going to stitch down those. I'll check my bobbin before I go any further. So now we have a new bobbin. We shall sew those. So as I said, I'm going to sew those at a 3mm and at a 6, which is a 1/4 inch and 1/8. So I'm going to sew from the purple side, and I start with a 6mm. I find that easier, and then go down to the 3. So here are our straps. And we shall place where our straps are going to go. Now I'm going to turn this through. Just push in the corners. Push your corners out. So lie that down flat. And I'm going to mark where our straps are, or where the end of our panel is. I'm just going to put a little nick in there. Then I'm going to mark the back at the same point. That's right there. So I think I want the black facing up, so I would need to have the wrong side or the right side lined up. And I'm going to put it just on the inside. Now I'm going to put some rivets in here, so I'm going to allow maybe a 10mm or 3/8 of an inch just past that. And it does pay to put a clip in either side because they tend to twist. Make sure the strap has not got a twist in it. Make sure it's got the same amount underneath or hanging over the edge. And do the same with this. Right, so what we want to do is baste those in place, and I do that from the inside. It's just easier. So now I'm going to work on my piping, my faux piping. I'm going to wrap it fairly firmly around the bag because I want to have this as one piece. I'm not stretching it, but I am having it quite firm. I'm purely doing this to get a join. Yep, that's fine. So I should take that off. And I know I need to join it there and there, just in case it moves. So I'm going to sew down there. And trim that off. Now I can sew it together. So I'm just going to sew that. Just mark a point in the middle. So I might sew this on. I know the people who do this all the time just sew it, and it looks amazing. Baste it in place. So we have our binding on and we have our straps on. Now we want to put our lining on. So I'm going to keep my lining inside out and I'm going to put my slip pocket on the back. So you can decide whichever way you want. So I'm just going to line the slip pocket up with the back and just put my bag inside like that. Making sure the straps are down. And push your bag in. Line up our centres. Now this should be a tight fit because our lining is a little bit smaller than our bag. And our side seams. Make sure they line up. So I'm going to sew it from the inside. Just need to make sure my lining is down. Now we want to sew all the way around that. I'm going to put a piece of tape on my machine because I don't have markings on it. At the seam allowance I want. Keeping it a equal distance away from the edge for your piping. So now, because we've got our bag folded that way, we can simply start pulling it through. Now we do want these seams open. And it's easier to make sure they're open as you turn it. Put your hand down and make sure it's all out properly. They all line up and everything lines up. That's cool. Just making sure those seams are out nice and flat. So now I'm going to get my centre points and close up the bottom. So you could always pull this through a zip pocket. Good. Now if you've got any straggly ends there that you want to melt, it's a good idea to do that before you turn the bag. We'll put the lining inside. And just push that down in your bag. And all that's left to do is top stitch, and I'll put some rivets in my strap. I like to rivet my tote straps as well if I can, because people tend to load them up with all sorts of things. But it does depend a little bit on the style. So I'm just going to crease that down, and fortunately the batik fabric lets me crease it nicely. And I'm going to clip it around there. Turn this inside out, just the way my machine is at the moment. It might be easier to top stitch from the other side. I don't normally, I'm usually quite happy to top stitch from the outside, or from the inside, sorry. Just with that piping, I want to get a definite straight edge off the piping. Just run some clips around the top. Okay, let's top stitch. So I'm going to start from a side, and I've got my little piece of hump jumper webbing here. And I'm going to do a double row of top stitching around the top to match my straps. So initially I'll do a 6mm. Now when I'm doing a double row of top stitching, I always like to end my cotton and start again. Okay. Right, now to turn it through. Tidy up any ends you might have sticking out the bag. Looks all right. I like that double stitching around the top, just gives it a nice finish. So that's it, all done. So if you've liked what you've seen today, please like, comment and subscribe. And if you have any suggestions on what you'd like to see next, please drop those in the comments. So let me know what you've done with your Cut Me tote, because you can make it up anyhow you want. This is purely a suggestion on how you can make it. So thanks for watching.